Next, I'd like to introduce Dan'l Lewin. Dan'l is Corporate Vice President, Emerging Business Development at Microsoft Corporation. And I would just like to say he has been a long-time active contributor and thought leader at SVForum as part of the board and as a volunteer on so many different committees. Dan'l is responsible for leading Microsoft's global engagement with startups and venture capitalists. Based in Mountain View, he has executive, site, and citizenship responsibility for the company's operations in Silicon Valley, which currently employ 2,500 people. Dan'l has spent more than 30 years in the Valley as an executive leading sales and marketing divisions for companies including Apple Computer, Next, and Go Corporation. Before joining Microsoft, he was CEO of Origin Systems, a startup that pioneered intellectual property asset management. He serves on the boards of SVForum, as I mentioned. I mentioned it first, of course. The American Electronics Association, the Churchill Club, and the Tech Museum of Innovation, as well as others. And he holds an AB in politics from Princeton University. Dan'l?
Thank you, Susan. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have the opportunity to say a few words about Bud Tribble. And as I thought about it, I had a lot to draw on. I've known Bud for over 30 years, so that's to start. I thought hard about where to begin, and so my initial reaction was to just start with sort of the ABCs. So A is for Apple. Bud works there. The key point, though, is the company wouldn't be what it is today without Bud. There's lots of things that we could talk about on that front. B is for Bud. He's a really great guy. And for those of you who don't know, his real name is Guy. C, for those of you who are listening closely these days, C is for Objective-C. That was Bud's choice for the next operating system. It's what people program Apple computers and phones with these days. D is for dynamic binding. That's the primary reason I think why Bud picked Objective-C. It's the programming language. It was kind of ahead of its time, but it was important. So then I was going to go on and say E, F, Hutton. Some of you were alive in the 1980s, I think. So the point there is I could go on, but I just made my point. When Bud speaks, people listen. People like Steve Jobs listen. And that's hard to imagine for those of you who know Steve. So Bud picked the processors, he architected the software that established how computing for the rest of us has evolved. And while he's never one to speak loudly nor be verbose, I would also say that he's rarely, if ever, said anything that's controversial. Except a little while ago, he had this moment when he was in Washington, D.C., sitting in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee on Privacy, Technology, and Law, across the table from Al Franken. So it turns out that the situation has been referred to as a location gate, for those of you who track this in any particular way. So let me begin by sort of framing how the exchange begins. Franken was trying to make this point that there were two statements that had come out of Apple, and in particular, I think, out of Steve's mouth, relative to how the iPhone finds its location. And another statement relative to the databases that generate that location. And so, as Franken said, Mr. Tribble, it does not appear to me that both of these statements could be true at the same time. Does this data indicate anything about your location, or doesn't it? And so Bud's reply, which I think is prescient, was, Senator, the data that's stored in the database is the location of as many Wi-Fi hotspots and cell phone towers as we can have. The data does not actually contain, in our databases, any customer information at all. It's completely anonymous. It's only about the cell phone towers and the Wi-Fi hotspots. However, when a portion of that database is downloaded onto your phone also knows which hotspots and cell phone towers it can receive from right now. So the combination of the database of where are those towers and hotspots, plus your phone knowing which ones it can receive right now, is how the phone figures out where it is without the GPS. Al Franken, never at a loss for words, had nothing to do but listen. The exchange was over. And in case you haven't been listening, Bud's had an amazing career, both at Apple, founding Next, a couple of stops, and then back to Apple in 2002. And because it's important to have a fallback position in case things don't work out, he's got a BA in physics, an MD, PhD in biophysics and physiology, a terrific and lovely, talented wife, Susan, and 2 lovely children, and hundreds of millions of people who love the products that he's so quietly architected. Bud Tribble.
Well, thanks, Dan'l. I want to thank the SVForum. I'm honored, and I'm not sure I thought of myself as a visionary, but it made me think about what that means. I'll get to that in a minute. So I just have a couple things to say. One is so I noticed the name change to SVForum. I think that's appropriate. Silicon Valley is an amazing place. I came here in 1980. A lot of companies and people come through, and one of the questions they ask is, how can we recreate Silicon Valley in our town, or our country, or our whatever? And I'm not sure that's possible, because what really creates Silicon Valley is the connection between people. And of course the internet is wonderful for connecting people, but there's something about going out late at night for pizza with a couple of napkins that you're drawing on that is really hard to recreate, and so far no one's been able to do that. I had a boss once who shall remain nameless. He showed up from the East Coast along Route 128 where DEC and some other companies were. He showed up, and he was an exec. For the first 6 months, HR kept giving him resumes, and he kept putting those resumes right in the trash can. Finally, they went to him and they said, boy, you're picky. What's wrong with these resumes? And he says, and they were resumes from people, you know, in Silicon Valley. He said, look at these resumes. This he's been 5 different places. He can't be any good. The connections between people in Silicon Valley are hard to recreate, but they're incredibly persistent. They persist beyond companies, and it's sort of the magic of this place. And so I think SVForum is a good name change there. So back to, you know, I thought about what does it mean to be a visionary, and one thing that comes to mind is that you know, vision depends a lot on your perspective. And I'm particularly reminded of a quote by Alan Kay, I think from back 1982, where he said that perspective can be worth 80 IQ points. And there's a lot of truth to that statement. If you're trying to solve a problem or trying to create something, you know, the perspective you take on it is extremely important. Now, Alan didn't say which way the 80 IQ points went, though, I'll note. Thinking back to when I joined the Mac group in 1980, we actually had a very interesting collection of perspectives that I think was extremely helpful. We had a music professor, a biochemist, a physicist, an archaeologist, a Marxist. There was myself, who was a neurophysiologist on leave from medical school. You know, this coming together of different perspectives, we actually had one computer scientist on the group. This coming together of different perspectives, which is part of Silicon Valley, I think is incredibly important. It's incredibly important that companies allow this to happen. And it helps to you know, move yourself back from the technology and the bits and the bytes and the transistors. The one thing that's persisted through all the years in terms of perspective for me is, and this started with the Macintosh, it's understanding what computers are good for. And it's amazing how many people don't step back and ask that question. But, you know, instead of being good for computing, which they are, what computers are really good at is being an amplifier for how people communicate. They're a tool for communication between humans. And with the Macintosh, that led to things like desktop publishing, paying a lot of attention to how can we use these tools to communicate. Education, another example, it's communication between generations. Communication is unique to humans. Other animals don't do it so much, not quite as much. And it's persisted till today with the things like the iPhone, and if you look into the future, which I can't really talk about since I'm at Apple, but if you look into the future, I guarantee you that these devices will have more and more to do with how humans communicate with each other. I don't want to take a lot of time here, but those two take-homes I would take home. Perspective can be worth a lot when you are tackling a problem, and having a perspective that's unique and different than someone else counts for a lot. And secondly, all these devices we're making, at the end of the day, they're for how humans interact with one another. So in closing, I want to say thank you again. I'm deeply honored, and I see a lot of friendly faces, a lot of new faces too. It's great to make the connections. Thanks.